Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Jonathan Niddle, and today I'm going to be speaking about how regression analysis can be beneficial for Christian nonprofit organizations. As faith-driven organizations, we have a unique responsibility to be good stewards of the resources that our donors have bestowed upon us, while also maintaining alignment with our values and our mission. So this is me, and before we dive in, I wanted to frame our discussion around the question: how can we use data-driven approaches to maximize our impact, but also while honoring our Christian principles? Regression analysis can offer powerful tools to help us understand relationships between variables, predict outcomes, and help us optimize resource allocation. But as we'll explore today, these tools need to be implemented with careful consideration because there are some ethical implications that we need to consider. So first off, let's talk about the history of regression analysis in business. It hasn't always been available for all businesses to utilize like it is today. During World War II, statistician W. Edwards Deming, he pioneered using regression to predict quality control issues in wartime manufacturing, which helped to reduce defects rates and improve efficiency, helping the United States during World War II. The computer revolution of the 1960s and 1980s brought a lot more computing power, helping more organizations to be able to utilize these regression techniques, as opposed to having to do them primarily by hand, which is what Deming was doing. And in the 1990s, 2000, and on to today, big data has exploded, allowing businesses to apply regression techniques to answer more and more complex questions, and then use the answers that they get from those questions in order to have some strategic decision making. And in regards to nonprofits specifically, it follows similarly to the path of just regular business, but in the early days, in the 1960s and 70s, it was primarily really, really large foundations. Talking about the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, they began to use regression analysis to evaluate the effectiveness of programs, which has become more and more of a theme as we've moved on throughout history. And in the 1990s and 2000s, saw what experts call the program evaluation era, where there was a lot more pressure from donors, from outside influences, from governments, and these foundations that were giving large sums of money for nonprofits to be able to prove through quantitative evidence how effective the programs were. And so as Rossi and his colleagues noted in 2018, this represented a fundamental shift towards outcome-based funding models. And that's only continued more and more to this day. Even in the late 2010s, the effective altruism movement has emerged, where it has brought to the forefront of a lot of individual donors' minds that we should be donating to things that are the most effective and have been proven to be the most effective, not just through anecdotal evidence, but through hard statistical impact. So now let's go over what the benefits of regression analysis have for us as nonprofits, right? So regression analysis can help us identify key relationships, revealing what factors most strongly influence outcomes in our programs. And then as we tweak that, it can, just improve effectiveness overall. Secondly, it quantifies the impact, which allows us to measure precisely how much a change in one variable affects another. And, kind of the tweaking of these multivariable regression analyses can help us dial in our programs even more. And this is important because as nonprofits, a lot of us are working under limited resources, right? So it helps enable resource optimization, helping us allocate our precious resources where they're going to have the greatest impact. It also allows us to then use those things to evaluate our performance, right? We want to be able to prove to our donors, prove to those who are entrusting us with their money to help to do our charity that we're being effective, right? And as we do that, we're able to build confidence in our donors as they're able to see statistically, right, the effects of our programs, not just on an anecdotal level. And many organizations have begun to do this, but one of the earliest and one of the most notable is Compassion International. And actually, before we dive into Compassion International, I just want to point out here that this photo of Alejandro here is a photo of the Compassion International kid that my parents, our family, have supported since 2010. So that's 15 years. He's 18 now, and since the age of 3, individual donors such as our family have been able to connect with individual kids to help with donating and alleviating poverty, which is what Compassion International has aimed to do. So Compassion International, faced with those calls in the 90s and 2000s to evaluate their programs, they teamed up with a team of economists, Wydick, Galou, and Rutledge, and those economists were able to they were able to run a bunch of regression models, grab data from Compassion International to try to see exactly, what are the outcomes from their programs. And their analysis revealed several key findings. Sponsored children were significantly more likely to complete their education, which is shown in the graph there. They're more likely to obtain employment, particularly white-collar positions, right? And they were able to achieve economic self-sufficiency much more than their non-sponsored peers. I believe the numbers in the study it was about a 19 to 22% higher adult earnings for children that were sponsored as opposed to non-sponsored. So the study, it was published in a prestigious economics journal at the University of Chicago. It provided evidence of Compassion's effectiveness, but it also guided program improvements and helped create donor communication strategies. This really demonstrates how regression analysis can be a powerful tool for helping nonprofits fulfill their mission more effectively. However, there are some concerns that need to be noted, right, when navigating this arena of employing regression analysis as well as other statistical measures. The first concerns data privacy. And one of the most interesting ones in the context of nonprofits is power imbalances. As Muldrum and colleagues noted, implicit or explicit coercion may be present when individuals perceive that their access to services depends on their willingness to share personal data. Another is resource limitations. As I had mentioned earlier, a lot of nonprofits are working on limited resources, so they have less resources to try to invest in data privacy and data security, which could leave nonprofits vulnerable to data leaks. Also, secondary use issues can arise where, individuals may agree for that data to be used in one specific way, but then the data could be used in different ways, right, in the future, which can raise some ethical quandaries, right? And for each of these ethical concerns, I'd like to turn our attention to the Bible and to biblical perspectives and guidance that can help us navigate through these ways, right? So first off, Genesis 1:27 reminds us that all humans are created in God's image, right? Which is it establishes the inherent dignity of an individual, right? And we need to respect this dignity of not only the individual but the data that the individual produces. In Psalms 82, 3 through 4, it calls us to defend the weak and the fatherless, and uphold the cause of the poor. And this emphasizes our social responsibility to protect the vulnerable, protect populations that we're serving. And also in 2 Corinthians 8:20, Paul demonstrates concern for transparency and accountability, stating it pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of man. Moving on here, let's move on to our second concern, which is algorithmic bias. Marabi and colleagues define this as occurring when a computer system or when our statistical analysis reflects the implicit values of humans involved in data collection, selection, or use. So what we want to not have here is we don't want our data and therefore our results of our data to be reflecting biases that may be inherent in the individuals themselves, right? And this bias manifests through representative data problems where our data sets may overrepresent certain communities or underrepresent others, right? And then if that happens, this can create feedback loops, right, which can perpetuate and amplify the original biases, which over time could build up and lead us to go in the wrong direction. So turning to the Bible, right, Scripture says that we need to be both fair and impartial, right? In Micah 6:8, it calls us to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And I think the Scripture is really powerful, creating a three-part ethical framework for our work. Acts 10:34 to 35 reminds us that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him, right? So God is impartial and we need to be impartial as well. And James 2:1 through 9, once again, speaks against favoritism, reminding us that if we do have favoritism, if we do have bias, we sin and are convicted by the law as lawbreakers. Finally, I think there's some concerns if we become over reliant on metrics, right? Uh, as people working in nonprofits, working with individuals, the individual dignity and nature of humans can be reduced and can be presented as less important when we rely too much on quantitative metrics, right? The complex realities of our situations are reduced to measurable variables, which can, kind of reduce the impact of humans. And also, a lot of nonprofits, particularly in the Christian space, are trying to further the mission of Christ, right? And the impacts, these spiritual impacts, are really hard to measure, right? So if we're focusing just on these metrics, then we may push resources to situations that have less of a spiritual impact, right? Speaking of our mission in the spiritual realm. And then, God reminds us that there are kingdom metrics, right? The metrics of bringing those to Christ, of turning away from the 99 to go out and get the one, right? And then there's man's very rational metrics. And efficiency, it isn't always aligned with biblical perspectives. And we can see that here, right? In Luke 15:3 through 7, it talks about that parable of the lost sheep, where God values the one over the 99, and this challenges our efficiency-focused metrics. And Matthew 25:31 through 46, it presents various different kingdom metrics that we can use to have a compassionate response to the human needs of those that we are helping, not just the quantifiable outputs. So as we conclude here, I want to emphasize three key takeaways. First is that regression analysis it's a powerful tool for Christian nonprofits, and it can offer significant benefits for stewardship and for impact. Um, and we need to implement these tools with careful attention to the ethical concerns around privacy, bias, and metrics. Finally, when we do arise with these concerns, we should turn to Scripture. Scripture provides valuable guidance for navigating these challenges, calling us to maintain a balance between, these technical techniques and our biblical values. Just before we conclude, I would like to present my sources here, uh, just to make sure that they're covered here. However, as we conclude, as we continue to work in nonprofits, trying to focus on not only being effective and efficient in the realm of man, but also effective in furthering the kingdom of Christ, I would like to leave you as sort of a benediction, this quote from Saint Benedict, which is, "Whatever good work you begin to do, beg of God with most earnest prayer to perfect it." Thank you.